The purpose of this video is to walk through what the Washington foreclosure timeline looks like from start to finish. It's a question I get asked a lot, hoping to give you guys some good information. If you're already a subscriber on this page, welcome back. If not, make sure you subscribe, like the videos below, ask me questions, tell me things, I will reply to you. You can see on my other comments, I love interacting with you guys, so anything that I can hear from you is great. So if you are a homeowner in Washington state, the first thing you have to understand is that Washington's foreclosures are primarily non-judicial foreclosures. If you want more information about that, there's a video on this page that talks about the difference between judicial and non-judicial. So this video is the non-judicial foreclosure timeline in Washington, which is typically the way that most of foreclosures go. Non-judicial just means basically outside of the court system. You're not going to be formally sued when you go through a non-judicial foreclosure. So let's just start at the beginning, right? So you miss a payment. At that point, you've missed a payment. This is called in default, right? You have defaulted on a payment. Most mortgage payments are due on the first of the month, and then they give you either a 10 or a 15-day grace period. That's most commonly what we see. So if you're just a little bit late, like if you need to pay your mortgage on the 3rd or the 4th of the month, you're typically not going to be labeled in default, and you typically won't have a late fee applied. They give you a little bit of a grace period before late fees apply. But if you have a payment due on the 1st, you don't make your payment, and then it's like the 10th or the 15th, whatever your grace period end date is, and you continue to not make a payment, at some point, typically at the end of that month, they will kind of flag your account as being in default. And then what I call like the horribleness begins. You will be receiving collection calls nonstop, and you will be getting scary, what I call acceleration notices from your bank. So what you can expect when you're about 30 days behind, meaning you've missed one mortgage payment, is the bank will aggressively try to collect that mortgage payment. This is when, you will really see kind of the aggressive debt collection side coming from your bank. Some banks outsource collection calls to other countries. Some banks will call you repeatedly at weird hours, trying to catch you when you're home, early in the morning, late at night. Some banks will call from blocked numbers or numbers that have like your area code of where you live, so you think it's a local number, to kind of like trick you into picking up the phone. And the purpose of these calls is just to collect the funds. They will tell you you might have some options, maybe you fill out a packet, but ultimately please understand that the bank is a creditor and they are trying to collect the money. So this is what I call kind of the collection phase. They haven't officially moved the file from default to foreclosure. There's another video on this page about the difference between being in default and in foreclosure. But for the purposes of this, you're in this kind of collection phase. The letters that you're going to be receiving are coming directly from your bank, your lender. So if you have Bank of America, your acceleration notices will say at the top, Bank of America, and they will tell you you're in default. This is how much you need to pay. You need to pay us as soon as possible. And you can also expect that once you miss a full cycle of mortgage payment, that late fees will start to accrue to your account. At a certain point, this is different depending on lenders, most commonly around your 2 to 3 month mark of being behind, most commonly your 3-month mark, you will receive a document in Washington called a Notice of Pre-Foreclosure Options. That is abbreviated as a Nopo. It will say Notice of Pre-Foreclosure Options on it, but it will typically still be issued by your lender. So most of the time, you won't see a trustee or a different company or a foreclosure attorney's office on it. It usually still will be from your bank. For example, Carrington Mortgage, a very common lender, they issue all of their NOPOs from them. And the most important thing to know about your Notice of Pre-Foreclosure Options is that it gives you a right to request what's called a meet and confer meeting in Washington. So this is what I'm calling the first of 3 formal foreclosure notices that you will get. At this point, when you receive your NOPO, you can understand that number 1, the bank has kind of moved the file from being in this in default status to an in foreclosure status, and they are telling you they're going to move forward. Inside this NOPO is a right to request a meet and confirm meeting. Almost all meet and confirm meetings are done telephonically. The notice will say you can do them in person, but right now, especially because we're in the middle of our COVID pandemic, they're happening over the phone. So requesting a meet and confirm meeting means you call your servicer, you request this meeting, and the lender has to provide you a meet and confer meeting. Now, the meetings in and of themselves aren't super useful. The representative is just going to tell you your options to apply for different loss mitigation options. They'll tell you you can do a loan modification, you can do a repayment plan, you can do a short sale, you can sell your home. Whatever options are on the table for you, they'll basically tell you that, and then they typically just say something like, and here's the application form, I can send it to you. There are a ton of other videos on this page about those individual options and kind of what you need to do for those. So the substance of the meeting isn't great. You can't really expect the issue to get resolved. You can't expect them to make an individual deal with you. It's not a full-blown negotiation. You're just going to get some customer service rep on the phone who's going to talk to you about loss mitigation and tell you to fill out an application. However, if your goal is to delay this foreclosure timeline, make sure you exercise all your rights, you should still request and have a meet and confirm meeting, because once you request that, the bank cannot give you the second notice in this foreclosure timeline until that meeting is held. The second notice is called a notice of default. So once you get that Nopo, notice of pre-foreclosure options, number one, if you want to make sure you have representation the whole time, that would be a good time to get some help. But otherwise, request your meet and confirm meeting, have it with your lender, and that will kind of hold off this second notice coming. So after the Nopo happens, if you do not request a meet and confer, about 30 days from then, you're going to get a notice of default. If you have your meet and confer, your notice of default will come after your meet and confirm meeting, if the issue is not resolved. And of course, just as a side note, you can be applying for options to resolve the issue at all times. The earlier, the better. There's other videos about that. After the Nopo, you get a notice of default. This is what homeowners refer to a lot as the scary notice, right? It is a little bit scary because it will be taped to your door and they will mail you a bajillion copies of this notice. This looks very formal. It's multiple pages long. And you can identify this notice, number one, because it says notice of default on it, but also it will come from either a trustee's office or a foreclosure attorney's office. So a trustee in Washington is just an organization, typically a company or a law firm, that is hired by the lender to legally do the foreclosure in Washington state. There are some main trustees in Washington that handle foreclosures. Their names are listed below this video, so you can kind of figure out who's your trustee. So that doesn't mean your lender's not involved, and that doesn't mean that your trustee is the only person to talk to. It just means that you are at this point in the process where there are now two parties involved. Your lender and your trustee are kind of coming to take this home. So the notice of default comes. The notice of default does not set a foreclosure auction date on your home. What it does do is it tells you, number one, that you're in default. It gives you a reinstatement amount and an outline of all of the fees that have been added since you've been moved to foreclosure. So like we talked about, late fees, foreclosure fees can start to be added at this point. Other things that you might not have paid that are in your original contract will be itemized out on this notice of default form. But most importantly, this is the point in time when you may be eligible for mediation in the state of Washington under the Foreclosure Fairness Act. If you meet certain eligibility criteria, and if your bank is one of the creditors that is subject to this statute, you might be able to attend mediation in Washington. Now, there's another video about mediation in Washington. If you want to know about that right now, stop watching this, go watch the mediation video. I'm not going to get into the details about mediation because this is a foreclosure timeline explanation, but the notice of default is really when you want to talk to an attorney, talk to a housing counselor, talk to somebody to find out if you can go through this process, because this process will stop the foreclosure activity the moment that you file. So if you can file at this second notice phase, meaning you get your notice of default and you file your mediation, the bank cannot give you the third and final foreclosure notice until you've had your mediation session. So it's a way to stop the timeline, bring the bank to the table, and see what resolution you can negotiate. So you get your notice of default. Hopefully you're watching this video and you figure out how to file your mediation. If not, or if you're not eligible and you can't figure something else out, about 30 days from your notice of default, you will get your notice of trustees sale. Other terminology for this is sometimes called your notice of foreclosure, but in Washington, it's called a notice of trustees sale, abbreviated as an NOTS. This is the third and final notice that you will receive, and it will set a foreclosure auction date on the home. So on the very first page of this, it'll say notice of trustees sale. It will be issued to you by a trustee. And on the first page, it will tell you the date and time that you have a foreclosure and auction date on your property. So it will say on whatever, July 16th, 2021, we will sell your home at 10 a.m. on the courthouse steps of, and then it will talk about your county. So what's important to understand is once you get this notice of trustee sale, this is the last notice you will receive before your home goes to foreclosure. It has to set the foreclosure date a minimum of 120 days, which is 4 months in the future. So it's not going to be a situation where you get this third notice and then the next day they come to take the home, right? They're going to tell you, and they have to tell you 4 months in advance. So if you have this third notice, this notice of trustee sale, and you've done nothing, meaning you have not talked to your bank, you've not filed a mediation, you haven't talked to an attorney, you haven't talked to a housing counselor, you don't know what you're doing, this is another ding, ding, ding moment where you need to actually reach out for help in some way and get someone to help you. Because at this point, you have 4 months. If you do nothing, they'll take your home in 4 months on the date that they tell you in the letter. There are some things that might postpone that date. The COVID foreclosure moratorium is one of them. An open loan modification review going on might postpone your date. There are a few things that might postpone it, but if you have this notice, that's the time to get help. That's your last notice. So you get your third notice. Let's say you don't do anything. 4 months go by. They sell your home at auction. One of two things will happen at the foreclosure auction. Either a third-party buyer will purchase the home, or nobody will purchase the home and it will revert back to the bank and become the bank's property. Once that foreclosure auction takes place in Washington, you have 20 days to vacate the home before the new purchaser or the bank can issue eviction paperwork. So that's the foreclosure timeline. I'm just going to quickly recap the time frames from the beginning. So you miss your payment, you go to collection phase. That lasts about 3 months, sometimes less, sometimes more. You get a Nopo, notice of pre-foreclosure options. If you don't request your meet and confer, if you don't do anything, 30 days later, you get your notice of default. If you don't do anything, if you don't go to mediation, if you don't apply for anything, 30 days later, you get your notice of trustee sale. That gives you 4 months. So the general non-judicial foreclosure timeline in Washington in the fastest possible way is about 30 days being in default, 30 days with a Nopo, 30 days with an NOD, and then 4 months with your notice of trustee sale. The earlier in the process you can get help, the earlier in the process you can resolve the matter, you're going to preserve more rights, you're going to get yourself to mediation. So make sure if you're getting any of these notices or if any of this sounds familiar to you, or even if you're just back at the beginning in that collection phase and it's super unpleasant because you're being called, call for help, figure out where you're at first, take a deep breath, and there's people out there to help you figure out what you can do. Let me know if you need help from me. Bye-bye.